All right, H3 radiators. It's a pretty important topic for H3 owners. Um, I'll start off and say that H3 radiators are probably undersized for the vehicle weight, and in some cases, if you have the V8, for the power that they make. As you can see here, this is a pretty small radiator. A lot of people also complain about the stock radiators cracking, and when the stock radiators crack, they will mix the transmission fluid, if you have an automatic, with the coolant, and you end up burning up the transmission. So for this reason, a lot of people go away from the stock radiator. Another thing I'll mention is that the aftermarket radiators seem to be hit or miss. I used a cheap, I believe it was eBay or Amazon, $150 aluminum radiator. And that radiator, for some reason, seemed to never, ever overheat rock crawling and going at slow speeds, but it would overheat at higher speeds. Now, some would say that's not your impeding flow or the radiator isn't big enough, but it was the stock radiator, and I had an OEM radiator before that, and the OEM radiator didn't overheat at highway speeds. So I don't know, there must be some radiator magic that happens that I did not understand. From there, I went to a CSF radiator, and I'll first mention that I guess back in the day, my overheating issues weren't really an issue. I know that it was for a lot of others. But anyways, I was worried about a cracked radiator, and I got a CSF radiator. This radiator I put in 2017, and it did its job very well. I took it on Ultimate Adventure, and it powered a heavy H3. At the time, it had a 5.3 liter V8 with 1-ton axles and 40-inch tires. So as you can see, this is not really a stock H3. It's got 43, now it has 43-inch tires, but 1-ton axles, 5.3. And on Ultimate Adventure, I was in Arizona, and that was when it was like 125 degrees out. And this radiator kept up. Rock crawling, it seemed like no matter what, it would not overheat at higher speeds. But rock crawling, it would get a little bit warm, but I never had to like pull over or stop. Admittedly, this radiator did its job for UA in the extreme heat. But the downfall of this radiator is they always leak. And mine has been leaking for quite a bit now, and it's time to do something else. Some could argue, oh, you know, it did its job, put another one in. But for the price they charge, the fact that you know it's going to leak again, and the performance that it gave, and for the price it is, I'm not willing to put in another one. So that's what brings us to this radiator over here. This is an ECP radiator, and it is substantially larger than any other radiator that's on the market for an H3. So I'm going to go into depth about the install. I'll say because it is larger, it doesn't want to fit with a water pump. So I'm going to go into some of the details of how we're going to make that work. I'll say that someone else has already done this and they documented it on a forum, but I figured I'd make a video about it. But some facts, or I say facts loosely, it's someone else's facts or statement, and I can confirm it. But I was told that the OEM type radiators, the OEM sized radiator holds 0.7 gallons. Now this is not the entire system, but the radiator alone, so 0.7 gallons. This one holds 1.6. The entire system, when you factor in, you know, the water through the block and the water pump and in the reservoir, the entire system is 3.6 gallons with a factory radiator, and then this brings it up to like over 4.5. So what most people do that run this radiator, they switch to E-fans. I'm not going to do that. I like the fan clutch. And what essentially I'm going to do is cut out the core support, and then I'm going to shift the whole radiator forward. So what I'll do is I'll pull the fan shroud, drop, or then take a measurement between the fan shroud, or sorry, the fan and the radiator, and then get that distance, put this one in, get the new distance, measure the difference, and then if, let's say, the difference is 1 inch, then this radiator, or the new radiator, is going to have to go back 1 inch. So I'm excited for this. This motor is now a 6.2. I mentioned in 2017 I had a 5.3 in it. This was a 5-cylinder motor, or 5-cylinder H3, blew that up, put in a 5.3, hurt that motor, and now I have a 6.2. So a lot of power, small radiator. So I've managed cooling temps, but I'm all in for upgrades. So I'll get some more info as I continue along here. Okay, excuse the trickling. It's just the rest of the coolant coming out of the radiator. But I pulled the radiator, or fan shroud. I pulled the lines, and then I pulled the intake so I could get the shroud out. Shrouds are over there. And then what I did, and this will vary, whoops, this will vary for all of you. So what I did was I measured basically the outside blade to the radiator. And now I need to make sure I mimic that all the way for the new radiator. So by mimicking that, I'll make sure that this fan shroud, or this fan, never gets into the radiator. So your distance may vary because I have a 5-cylinder motor mount, or motor mounts, with a V8. So this was not a factory V8. So your distance may be a little bit closer or a little bit further. Same for the 5-cylinder. But either way, you just want to make sure you get the before measurement and the after, so you can make sure that it still sits back the same amount. As you see here, the fan clutch does clear the bigger ECP radiator, but it is not enough. I measured the distance between the fan clutch and the radiator, and it's 3/4 of an inch. I measured it between the fan shroud, and it was 3/4, what was it? It was just over 3/4 of an inch. It was over an inch. I don't remember. But either way, I took the measurements, and I basically have to shift this radiator forward 1.25 inches to get the same measurements between the fan and the fan clutch as it was with a stock sized radiator. So that'll be the next step. What I will do is measure it out and cut so this whole thing can come back. I think I will also build these bolt-on. I will build mounts that offset from the stock point over whatever the distance is, 1.25 inches. So it'll move the whole thing back, and then it'll be the stock distance, and everything will be happy. Okay, I've never welded aluminum before, and I don't know how to TIG weld, but I can pick up a Harbor Freight spool gun and learn how to weld aluminum, I guess. So I think I may try and pick one up tomorrow because Harbor Freight's already closed. But the reason you can't do that is because this is the mount for the AC condenser. So if you move this whole thing forward, you'd have to cut this bracket off because you have to shift the whole thing forward. So my thought is I'm just going to cut this, and cut this, and then there's one on the bottom, and then basically move it forward 1 inch and then re-weld. Never welded aluminum before, but if it works out and I have the room to do this, I think I may call up ECP and tell them, hey, look, you should offer these in 2 options, standard, factory, or 1 inch forward. And if they could offer that, I think that would be another option for, you know, guys that want to keep the fan clutch, and it'll make it easier on them. And then all they have to do is cut the top versus having to mess with all this crap. So I think it would be cool if I call them and see if they would be willing to do that in the future. But first things first is I just need to I need to figure out getting this forward, and we'll try and do that tomorrow. Okay, as you can see here, I cut the bracket off and moved it over 1.25 inches. I drilled holes and bolted it in, and then you can see here, bolted the side bracket back on. The bolts do not interfere. And now I did that to the other side, and now I'm going to cut in the core support, and then I'll test fit it. If everything goes well and it fits like it did when stock, I will then try and pull the ends back off and try an aluminum weld for the first time. I picked up a spool gun from Harbor Freight, so I probably should go get some scrap aluminum to practice first, but we'll see. So that's the next step. It'll be to cut this. All right, you can see here that the radiator is in. I did clearancing of the core support. The original dimensions were 2 inches between the fan clutch and the radiator. So 2 inches. Right now I have it at 1 5/8. And then I've got the fan here. The fan was 2 7/8, and now I'm at 2 5/8. So I think that's enough room. I went online and people were saying, oh, as long as you have 1 inch, 1.5 inches, you're fine. Those were hot rods. Obviously this flexes when off-road, and the body and the chassis and the motor all flex at different rates. I don't want it to run into anything, but you can see there's a ton more room than there used to be before the core support modifications. So I don't know. Let me know if you think that's enough or not. Alrighty, well, the radiator is in, or it was in, and then I went to bring in the AC condenser, and that's when I ran into more problems. So now I'm gonna have to clearance right here. What I'm probably gonna do is cut a section in it and then take a piece of tube, cut it in half, like think long ways, so you have a half a circle, and then weld that in. So it's kind of like clearanced like that into here. So it'll have metal like that. And the reason being is I don't want to lose too much structural integrity. So I definitely want to add in that piece up there or down there. Okay, so it's not all the way in because the AC condenser right now, but I trimmed 1 inch right here all the way across. Then I had to trim right here. This like protruded back, so it was in the way, so I had to cut that out. I'm going to have to cut, oh come on you fuck, right there, which like I said, I'm gonna do a half circle, take a piece of tube, cut it in half, half circle, and weld it back in, but it'll be to clear the tube on the AC condenser. And then there was a piece that stuck out down here that I had to trim back. Basically just trim it level with this piece of sheet metal, and that's it. So when I say that's it, I guess it's really not that's it, it's quite a bit, but that gives me the clearance I think I need. So in the end, I had to trim here. As you can see, I still had to clean up the cuts. I then had to cut here. Again, I'll clean up the cuts. I had to cut in here. This came out more, had to cut in there. Hold on. And I also had to trim this back and cut into that. And I had to trim over here. So trim, and cut into it. I don't think I have enough room to box it back in with tube. So what I'm gonna do is pull it off and plate it with 1/4 inch on the front side. Oh, let me see if I can get my finger in there on the front side. And then that'll give it the rigidity compared to a thinner piece of metal that has dimension to it. Alrighty, ECP radiator with fan clutch is in. Just topped off the radiator. I'll still have to top it off once I start it, but I still don't have my PCM, so I can't run it. But radiator project hopefully is officially done.